Welcome, and thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. On the program today, we're going to be learning about something which is known as regressive hypnotherapy, which can access any memories and meaning from the subconscious mind to resolve personal problems or trauma. We'll discover how this works and the types of issues the therapy can address for transformative healing. On our program today, we're joined by the founder of what is known as youve Hypnosis, which is a place located in Portland, Oregon. And her background is diverse, from working in art galleries, resorts and spas, hospitality, fine dining, and hypnotherapy. And as a chef for more than 12 years, she worked under 3 French master chefs. She found her niche in holistic cooking. Health, as well as being the ability to thrive, is at the top of most importance. She is an award-winning pineapple dessert, in fact, from Capital Food and Wine Contest. I'd like to welcome to the Beyond 50 radio program today our guest, Regressive Hypnotherapy Specialist, Sophia LeBlanc. Sophia, thank you for joining us here on the program today.
Hello, good morning. That was quite the introduction.
Well, especially when you blend hypnotherapy and food, you think to yourself, how do those two work together, actually?
Oh, right. I think it's the mind-body connection kind of working in harmony.
Now, let's talk first of all, what is hypnotic regression? Let's talk about what this process is here.
Okay, well, I want to make it clear because a lot of people are a little confused around the topic of hypnosis. I just want to be clear that hypnotherapy is much different from the hypnosis people see on a stage, which is stage hypnosis, which kind of uses shock in a way. So that's a very different process. And then within hypnosis, you have different types of modalities, and you have different approaches within hypnosis. So hypnotic regression it's a process by which you enter a trance-like state, which is guided by the hypnotherapist. And then you recall material from deep inside, which is not normally available to the conscious mind.
And it's pretty interesting to consider this whole modality here and how effective it is. And I was just kind of, curious when it comes to practicing this, how hypnotherapy or hypnotherapeutic regression actually works, what it actually does.
So hypnosis, it's in the regression, you're going kind of back in time to particular events that were probably stressful or maybe unwarranted. And you could even use it for recalling old traits or hobbies. Maybe there was a particular time in someone's life where they liked that part of life. And so you can actually go back and then you can either heal that part of maybe a poor memory or a traumatic experience, or you can actually kind of bring forth old traits or habits that are actually beneficial.
Now, how does hypnotic regression differ from most of the other sessions that people usually perform?
So hypnotic regression is just basically kind of going back in time, and that's pretty much how it differs. A lot of times with hypnosis, and there's so many different techniques, you're not really going back to a particular time. So for an instance, and this is a very basic explanation, say I'm coming to you and I'm a client and I say I'm really stressed. So then we start with the most presenting stressful issue, and then I go through a technique where I wake the person out of hypnosis, because when you wake them up out of hypnosis and you go back down, you actually go deeper into trance. So then I do that, and that's my technique. And then you go back to another situation that you found particularly stressful, and you kind of repeat the process. And it doesn't matter what the person thinks was stressful to them. It could be something as silly as my sister took my pencil when I was in class, or, it could be broad range. But whatever the person attached to stress or felt stress in the body, that's when you just keep going back in time to particular events and then recount those events. And that's really where the healing takes place.
Now, it's interesting that you use, we're talking about hypnotic regression to deal with personal problems and trauma. So tell us, you've touched on it, but, what is the role of how this can actually be effective?
So basically, when we're coming into life, we're basically just, and I don't want to discourage people from their beliefs, okay? There's different beliefs here, but we're basically coming in and we're at this blank slate, and then we form attachments to beliefs and what we've been told, and everything that comes into our mind is basically recorded. And sometimes people, from their experience or their beliefs or their upbringing, they can almost kind of adopt or play into what I call a script. And maybe there was something, an experience where they're reliving trauma or a particular problem, and then it becomes a pattern. And that pattern is resulting from what has been buried, basically, into their unconscious mind. Maybe what hasn't been resolved or what the person hasn't really been aware of. And hypnotic regression is really good at bringing the person to becoming more aware. I also not only is it the hypnotic regression, but it's also, I embed breathing techniques and relaxation techniques that reduces inflammation in the body. That's one of the things, psychological or physical stressors cause inflammation in the body, and then over time that constant inflammation in the body can continue to be the onset of disease. So it's a very powerful modality.
It definitely sounds like it is. Now, is there any length of time regression hypnosis works?
Regression can be used to something that someone wanted to kind of heal from, maybe something that happened last week. You can even go back to the time someone was like an infant. People do past life regression, which they believe they can go back to other lifetimes. And that's something that's very controversial. I'm a bit on the fence about that, but I normally try to take people back into this lifetime and really work with people, and really the person, the client, is really advocate for their own health. I'm really just the guide. They're really doing their own healing through the process.
Now, in regression hypnosis, when you get to a particular memory, what happens then?
So we use the information from the event to heal or find meaning or significance. We also find maybe there's a core belief in a person that isn't benefiting them. And that's something that I can leave up to the client to analyze or to think about, to really reflect on. Because it can get very complicated. It can get like, someone might have said something to them which kind of programmed them from an early age. And there's so many areas that progressive hypnosis works. Maybe it could be around self-esteem. Maybe someone grew up in a family where they said, oh, you're not going to be good enough, you're not going to be good enough. So whenever they run into conflict, they might say, oh, I'm not good enough, I'm not good enough. And then they might not try. So then go back with the regression. Then we see what comes to the surface, we heal that aspect, and then we also work to change the core belief, which that person adopted is not helping them, that I'm not good enough.
Seems like a lot of us sometimes feel that way, don't we? Now,
yeah, and we become like a sponge. We're really absorbing everything we hear, see, and do every day. So over time, we we form a pattern. It's basically going back in time and then kind of like changing, kind of finding ways where, okay, I can kind of make some shifts where I'm not following the same pattern. That isn't very beneficial to me.
Now, in regression hypnosis, what do you use this technique for?
In regression hypnosis, we can uncover past traits, our abilities, waking ourselves to a part of our life in which we want to remember. We can also access memory, which is hidden in the unconscious mind. And you can also use it, I mean, I mentioned trauma, but you can also mention it, go back into time where you had very pleasurable experiences or something you want to remember. And go back there, and then sometimes I've had a client where they wanted to go to a very happy time in their life, and they wanted to see, not only do I mention, don't focus on what doesn't work, but what did work for that person in that moment, time in their life.
So fascinating to hear about this kind of a thing. And what are some of the results that you've seen happen from using hypnotic regression?
What I've seen just as a kind of overview, I've seen a lot of people that feel less stressed, which is very valuable. I find people are able to connect to parts of themselves which they thought they were lost, like maybe they like to play music or pick up an instrument in childhood, and all of a sudden they're playing music again, and they feel connected to that. It's been across the board, but I would say as far as kind of the majority, it's been reducing stress, inflammation in the body, making people feel more at peace with themselves and happier and healthier, which is the goal.
Now, I'm curious, Sophia, what do people recall during regression?
So it can get pretty interesting. People can go back to the time they were 3 years old and vividly remember everything inside of a room, and prior to hypnotic regression, they might not even remember that day. Also, some people, they could go back in time and they could think, oh, this person said something to me, and they can really kind of be able to reflect on that. Because they're so relaxed, and then there's a lot of healing that takes place because kind of encouraging relaxation in the body. And when they go back in time using regression hypnosis, it's like over time when they attach meaning to a stressful event, it's like accumulative. So when we go back in time and then we kind of work through each scenario where we're encouraging relaxation in the body, that's really where the healing takes place. But it's so interesting and fascinating how people can remember things so vividly when they wouldn't probably recall it. Like if you asked them, hey, what did you do on what did you do on summer of June 1st of 1969? You may look at them like, oh, well, I don't remember that day. But all of a sudden with hypnosis, it's like, it's very powerful. It's very unique. We don't really know about hypnosis. I mean, there's research done on how effective hypnosis is, but I feel like we barely just barely touch the tip of the iceberg.
Now, let's talk about what the significance of hypnotic regression is.
So as I mentioned earlier, when everything that happens to us, whether it's pleasurable or even might be traumatic because it causes shock, everything is recorded. And so when we go back, we go back and we work in layers, and we go to the unconscious mind, we're really, really kind of going into a part of our mind that we're working with what's not always what we think we're working with on the surface, but we're working more deeply in the person. And I mean, it could feel like a very enjoyable but also spiritual experience for an individual.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it kind of I'd like to say it almost kind of like resets how a person, or maybe not resets is the right word, but it kind of could bring on a new way of thinking about situations. Because it's not just the situations that happen to us. What I believe is it's the continuous attachment to what has happened to us, how that really affects our life, whether it's negative or positive.
I know it's interesting how we a lot of times will perceive situations in a way other than what they actually are by bringing maybe a past experience with that situation, in that arena there, to where we would make a better or a different decision actually, if we could see it clearly for what it is instead of what we think it is. And I kind of wonder, what are some of the major concerns people usually will come to you for to use regressive hypnotherapy?
Okay, so you can use regression for pretty much everything. You can use it for trauma. You can use it for fears, phobias. You can use regression hypnosis for bringing forth maybe old hobbies, or maybe a particular time in your life where you kind of want to touch into that part of yourself again and really connect with that experience of the past. And I want to just kind of make clear, it's not like you're, I think some people think they think hypnotic regression is like redundancy or overthinking something. So it's not like that at all. It's very a relaxing experience, and it's interesting how people can connect the current fears to the past, if that's what they came in for, or even phobias, how phobias can be presented in the present, and then they can go back in time, and then they can realize where that phobia came from. So it's very powerful that way when you can connect with your current issue and then go back into really acknowledging where maybe your fear or phobia came from. And then what I notice is that is just in the present time, when they get out of hypnotic regression, the phobias just disappear. You just find a new way to think about what has happened in the past.
Now, as you've worked with people over the years, what have been some significant changes you've experienced in people? Share maybe a story or two for us.
Okay. Yes, I did hypnotic regression for a client, and I realized that they had this fear of flying, and there's different techniques for fear of flying. And then and it got very complex. We went back in time, and there's different scenarios of things that would happen, the phobias and whatnot. And what happened was, when we went back in time to the time they were a kid, they fell out of a tree, and what they recall is that kids were laughing at this person. So then when we get back to that experience, kind of like nurturing that experience as far as, well, you weren't hurt, you didn't, so it's kind of changing that experience into, I kind of think, well, what are some things that that person likes that has a sense of freedom or or something you would that flies, and the person likes birds. So this was a very unique experience. Then we just go back in time when that occurrence happened, and then we started a new process where the person then becomes a bird. as interesting that may seem. So then when they're becoming a bird, then they're feeling this lightness, they're feeling at ease, they're feeling a sense of freedom. So then when that person went back onto the plane, they recounted, oh, I have this experience that's as close to being like a bird where I can fly without having wings. So we just kind of changed, that experience of falling out of the tree, having your so-called friends, laugh at you, to like now you feel you can be lifted from that and you're actually resembling something as close to what would have wings or could fly. So that was a very unique hypnotic regression experience that I encountered with working with a client, but it did work. So
sounds like it did.
Yeah.
I bet people get very surprised too. Do you kind of record these things in a way where people can, like the both of you can, kind of go back and take a look at what happened, where they kind of leave their self scratching their head thinking, wow, I didn't realize that was in there.
Oh, when I'm with a client, I'm actually doing a lot of writing. Like my first initial consultation with a client, we don't even go into hypnosis. I have a questionnaire that talks about like all aspects of your life, and it's pretty lengthy. It's about 2 hours long, but it gives me an idea like what are your beliefs, what are your current issues, what's the most presenting issue that you're dealing with, what's an issue you've been dealing with for the long term. So I go through like different questionnaires and I ask about your life, the person's lifestyle, their home, even their home environment, their work environment. So I really try to utilize upstream thinking and really get a good idea of the person's background before I start working. And a lot of times the client will ask me to kind of surpass that, but I don't feel like it's as effective because I need that information to work with the person. And also, it's also a form of disclosure in itself, just having that initial consultation and really talking about things that's on the person's mind. And then, so from there, I do other types of hypnotherapy, and I utilize other modalities. Hypnotic regression is one modality I use. I use quite different types of techniques, but I also teach people when they leave my office things they can do. They also get homework.
Oh, that's
but
good.
I try to make it as fun as possible. And so I do record during the session, but I normally I'm just writing everything down, and I keep a file on the client, and then when they're done, they can choose if they want information from all the sessions, or so I just leave it up to them. But I do record, so I have all that information. And after the session, I normally give, so like a whole session is about 2 hours long, when there's like a bit of intake, kind of getting up to speed to where the person is, and that's roughly, and it's by individual, it's different, but sometimes it's like 10 minutes, and I teach like a breathing exercise. I teach different relaxation techniques prior to the hypnotic experience. And then when I bring the person out of the hypnotic experience, there's a form of disclosure. You kind of talk about the experience, and then we might talk about how the next session is going to go. So that's pretty much like the process.
Now, how can people get in contact with you? Is there a website where people can find out more information?
Yes, they can find me at youhypnosis.com, and from there I have number and I have email. And I like for people to email me because I feel like I can really, hopefully it's more private. So they can also reach me at my Gmail account, which is youhypnosis@gmail.com.
Well, Sophia LeBlanc, thank you so much for joining us here on the program and opening up this wonderful modality that can certainly help people to affect the changes in their life that they're looking to have. And it's been a pleasure to have you here on the program today.
Thank you so much.
You bet. I want to thank you, the listeners out there, for joining us. You can also discover more by visiting us at beyond50radio.com. That is the number 50. Sign up for our free weekly e-newsletter to keep up to date with what's going on in the world of Beyond 50 as well as upcoming shows. I'm Daniel Davis. Thank you for tuning in. This is the Beyond 50 radio program, and remember, live your day past halfway.